Welcome to our July Seniors Living Smarter webinar. We're excited to have you with us today as we explore the topic, Seniors Living Smarter, Flipping the Money Switch. How do you know when it is time to use your money for you? We've worked a lot of years to save this money and to be able to enjoy our retirement, but often there's uncertainties of how do we really move ahead with this money? So this is what we want to share information with you today. I know people are always interested in the webinars about, well, how many people are really on there? And we have close to or around 60 people with us today, actually more than that. A lot of those are 60 computers, and we have several couples joining together. We're delighted to have people with us today. And we have a lot of new people too, which is great. The seminars are really intended, and I've been so thrilled as this is our 5th year to host the seminars. Very committed to educating, equipping, and inspiring seniors to make informed choices, and empowered decisions regarding your lifestyle. So this is our underlying mission, and each month we put together different programs, often panels of experts to share information. These are not marketing seminars, but are intended to provide information and representatives of the industry so that you know what is available and can join it, can know where to go for resources and information. An important part of our seminars has always been the interaction before and after. So that's changed a little bit with our webinars, but still I see a lot of exchanges going on. I was really thrilled last month after our topic about from we to me, when you find yourself making all the decisions by yourself. I received a lot of emails from people wanting to connect with others to share resources, and I know that was very helpful. So I was glad to see that happen, and we will certainly continue to promote that. I'm always available as a resource person to help make connections. And I want to share with you, highlight for you our sponsors. We're so fortunate to have other businesses and services who share the commitment that I, as a certified senior downsizing coach, have to really providing education and information for people to make decisions. So we have sponsors who've joined with us in helping to make these seminars available. I'm just going to give quick introductions. We'll learn more about them in different times people are in the programs. Silver Key Benefits, helping us learn about our insurance, what we have or what changes might be necessary. We have Steve Jakovic from Silver Key Benefits, who is one of our panelists today. So you will be hearing more about those kinds of services. Traditions Health is a hospice program. And I hesitate when I say that because I think so many of us don't have quite the right information about what hospice really is. But we will be sharing more information. Chris Wills, who's with Tradition Health, was one of our panelists last month, and there are a lot of resources through hospice that people need to be aware of. Visiting Angels, and a lot of you have taken advantage of the great home services that are provided, whether it be long-term care or short-term care. I know I've had calls from people, especially during the COVID time. They're having a medical procedure, they're going to need help getting to the hospital or getting home. Family members who were going to be able to help were not able to help. And I've been pleased because somehow we know these agencies can't help during COVID, and they are. And they've had wonderful resources. Visiting Angels is one, and we really appreciate their support as a sponsor. And of course, the Wesleyan. Familiar with the great services of Wesleyan, everything from their independent assisted memory care communities, skilled nursing, and in addition, which a lot of people don't know, they also have home health services available, as well as hospice. So a full range of services. These companies join with me in being committed to providing education to seniors. Seniors Living Smarter Services is my company, as a downsizing coach, what I do is to work with people this move, and we've made moves before in our lives, but when we are moving from home ownership, often to live in an apartment or a smaller home, and significant downsizing is overwhelming. And there's so many bits and pieces. Too many times I see people shut down because they don't know how to handle it all. But we've got a great team of people. We can come in and simplify that from the sorting and organizing and packing, excuse me, to the liquidation, to the real estate selling of the property. So just a word there of what we do. And I love to visit with people about those services and resources. I want to connect with, before we go on today's topic, I want to connect for just a minute with last month's topic. When we tried to encourage people to take action steps. And last month we gave you a handout, 10 commitments to organizing for smarter decisions. And it was just kind of a guide to think, do I know where these documents are? What do I have in place? Have I communicated with appropriate people? And so we provided that as a follow-up. It's been great to watch to hear the comments. And I think, Jeff, do we have our poll ready for people to mark today? We put the poll up. I hope we have it. If not, that's okay. Okay. What I was wanting to have some interaction with the audience and to think, what have your next steps been? And even for myself, what did these next steps lead us to? We had to clean out file cabinets and rearrange things so I could find the documents. I know people did that. A lot of you said, oh, well, we got our stuff organized. That was great. I heard from a number of people about, I thought I had this all taken care of. But then I learned new things, and we've integrated that, or we've realized the need to update. One of my favorite stories, will not use names, but a woman was sharing with me that over the years she had been collecting these documents and really had the information together and had shared the information with her husband. But it was one of those, okay, we'll look at it later. He attended the webinar last month with her. And after hearing the discussion, said, well, maybe we should start getting our materials together. The wife was a little taken back. That's what I've been doing. Here it is. So for some of us, it was having those important conversations. But so that was, I just like to share. Oh, and to say, for those of you who were not with us last month, but would like to have that document, please feel free to email me and I will send it to you. And also some people have said, oh, well, I couldn't come to the webinar. I want the content. We are now putting our webinars on the website, Seniors Living Smarter, under blog posts. So you can visit there and see the recorded webinars. One of the silver linings from doing them as webinars, even though we miss our live seminars. So I think those are the things we wanted to cover. Also, I want to thank Jeff Cramp, who's working with us, helping us with the being our technician today. He works with me on marketing for my business and helps us with the webinars in that role. Let's see. Okay. Now for today, as we talked about the handout and what the next steps will be, it seemed important to me that we put it into a context. And so when we say, when is the time to flip the switch, it really depends on what are your goals. So what are the goals? What do you want to accomplish? For some people, you may have the desires to travel. Others, what are my basic needs to see me through my life? But we need to think about what are your goals and then what is your starting position? What are those assets? So we will have for you, we'll email it to you, a handout that will break some of that down too, so that you think, what are the necessities? How much is it going to cost me to live? How long am I going to remain in my own home? What are my fixed expenses with that? I can go back to the first one. Just a minute. Okay. when we talk about our, what are our fixed expenses, how much we need for health care so people can plan, but also they're the extra. What is it that we want to be able to do? What do we want to leave for our family if that is something we want to do, or for charities or causes that we support? So we're not quite getting the right slides, but that's okay. You'll see them in your handout. So we know what are our goals. What is our starting position? That's really kind of what we're going to figure out, talk a little bit today, not so much just what is the position, but what contributes to that. And then the importance of being able to know that there is professional help available. I know a lot of us are, I'll do it myself, and that's important, but we don't always know all the ins and outs, and we can certainly use the guidance of professionals. And so I have with us today two professionals who will outline some of the ways they work with people to make these things happen. And then we'll talk about, remind people that there are those special trigger points when things change in our lives, and that we want to be aware of that. So I want to open up our videos now, so we will see our panelists with us today. And I also want to explain a little bit about the format for those of you who are new. We have prepared questions we'll go through with our panelists, and then we will open it up to questions from the audience. You will see where there's a place for you to raise your hand, and we will call on you once we've completed the overall part, or we found it's helpful for us to get through that because we get a lot of the questions answered then. But so let's see, if you want, Jeff, you want to open the screen so we can meet Steve Degovic. Not saying it right, Steve, you can help us out, from Silver Key Benefits, and William Barton, who's with us from Vera Bank today. So can you get all of our videos showing? Let's see.
So while Jeff's working on that, let me go ahead and just start introducing myself.
Okay.
My name's Steve Degovic. If you've been to some of the previous seminars, you've probably seen me once or twice before. I own Silver Key Benefits of Texas. I've got an agency here in town with a number of different agents, and we're primarily focused on Medicare, but we also talk about all the various other components of being retired, like when you retire, your life insurance frequently is associated with your company and it goes away. Do you need long-term care insurance? Talking about some financial type things. And so that's our market and area. And since a lot of you have been retired for significant time, one of the things that is that there's a lot of allied areas there, because Social Security is related to Medicare. And so we end up becoming expert on Social Security. And because Medicaid can interact with people who have Medicare, we end up becoming expert on that. So there's a lot of different things that we end up working with and helping people with, and so at the end of the day, we're compensated two ways. When we enroll somebody in some form of health insurance, life insurance, that sort of thing, that's where we get compensated. But more importantly, or just as importantly, referrals. And so our big thing, and one of the reasons that Virginia works with us and likes us, and it works back and forth, is if we can just be a trusted source of information, that's very fulfilling and satisfying. So that's me and Silver Key Benefits in a nutshell.
Thanks, Steve, and I appreciate your commitment to referrals. I think that's what we're all doing. We want to provide quality service and information to people so we can work together. I think we need to have, Steve and will you on your own screens click start video?
I was doing that, and I'm getting a note that says you cannot start your video because the host has stopped it.
Okay.
And I
I,
just got the same.
Virginia, can you do that?
I get the message, ask him to start the video.
Ah, he just asked.
Right, magic, the same thing we did earlier. Let's see if this will help. Will, can we get you now?
Let's see here.
There we go.
There we are. Hi.
Technology is wonderful and it all works different ways. So we apologize for the rough start there, but thank you. So for those, you just heard the introduction from Steve, and there's his picture to go with him. And I was glad he mentioned we ran a lot of information in there, Steve, which was helpful. But about the compensation, I know some people, oh, I can't call him because I don't know how much it's going to cost me. But you're a source of information and you go from there. So I think that's important for people to understand. So there's a great resource to help analyze your insurance, and we're going to talk some more about that. Will, or William Boughton, is from Vera Bank. So we're glad to have you with us. Will, you want to tell us a little bit about your work, the services you provide?
Sure. First off, Steve, I'm very jealous of that red fish in your picture.
You know, keeping these two guys on track and not getting off to, oh no, Will. Steve's gonna go crazy now with boats and fishing.
Well, since we're going to go off track for just a minute, and since this is not purely informational, for anybody that didn't see it, I happen to love fishing. And I was down in South Padre Island earlier this year and caught my biggest redfish ever, which was 28 inches. So yes, that's what he's talking about. And for all of you other fishermen out there, fish on.
Tight lines, everybody.
Personal connections are definitely important. So there we go. Okay. Right. Now back to our subject here.
My apologies for the digression. So my name is Will Boughton. I'm the trust officer and wealth management advisor for Vera Bank, and I serve the Central Texas area. I do live and office here in Georgetown. You know, we provide really just comprehensive financial planning and estate planning services to individual clients, businesses, nonprofit organizations, and just a variety of other entities. Our services do include, you know, financial and estate planning, trusteeships, and executor services, as well as investment management. Our investment management services do include your typical, you know, equity and fixed income portfolios, as well as real estate and mineral interests such as oil and gas too. So we cover a variety of things there on that. We're a fiduciary, which does mean we have not only an ethical duty, but also a regulatory requirement to put our clients' interests first, which is something I also think is important. So in a nutshell, that's who I am and what I do.
All right, a lot of information. And I want to say one thing, because the word trust really grabs people's attention as a trust advisor or so on, trust manager. We are going to talk about that topic today, obviously from Will's perspective. I just want to give you a reminder, next month's topic, we're focusing more in depth about legal issues, probate, wills, trust, and we will have an attorney and an escrow agent from a title company. So we look at what's the impact and always the interesting challenge. So I have to have my will probated and selling my home and benefits. So that part comes next month, but we wanted just to look at the big picture of planning this month. I want to start by asking both of you just your response to our title of our seminar, our webinar today. What does flipping the money switch, when is it time to use your money for you? What does this mean to you in your line of work of advising, working with seniors? Let's start with Steve.
Okay. So I am not always involved in turning on the various money streams other than saying, hey, by the way, here's some information you need about Social Security. I had that conversation with some clients yesterday. He's actually a good friend as well, but he's turning 70 next month. And they've been waiting and waiting and waiting to start drawing Social Security. And basically because they've waited, his Social Security will be significantly larger now. But, you know, mine is not just about when is it time to use your money, but how do I make sure that the money lasts? Because, you know, a significant health event, a stroke, an unexpected operation, whatever, if you don't have the right insurance set up, or you're at least not prepared for that, those can really mess you up. And so for me, you know, when is it time to use your money is important, but it's almost as much as how do you want to use your money? How do you control where your different, you know, discretionary cash flows are going? I mean, do we have a budget for health insurance? Do we have a budget for what happens if you get sick, and, you know, all those different things? And that is going to be so different for everybody, because if you got longevity, you know, I mean, the men in my family, I'm probably going to easily live to be 90 plus. We don't have cancer or heart problems or strokes or that sort of thing in my family. But what we do have, my grandfather had Alzheimer's for 16 years. My dad's got it now. So I better be really sure that I've at least got some kind of plan in place for if that becomes a problem for me and for my family. And so that's my take on this.
The important part there is that knowing what the overall package is, so you know how to, you know, the answer to the question is it depends. What are your goals? What is your situation? But you're giving us, and I'm sure we'll touch on this again, you've shared with us before, some really poignant stories of the impact of dementia on your family. And that's one of the reasons you're really committed to the work that you are. And so being prepared, we don't like to deal with that topic of ourselves or our family. Some of us, it's more real to us right now because of spouses, or we see it coming, but we have to be prepared. So part of flipping the switch is knowing, what do I have in place to protect me as well as I can? So I think that's a great part there. Okay, Will, share us with us from your vantage point.
Gotcha. Thanks. And you know, there is a lot of commonality in I think the ways Steve and I both look at this, and he approaches it through areas that are different from the parts that I do. So I think it's a kind of a nice synergy. But you know, I'm going to kind of talk a little bit about the when it's time to use your money for you part. Okay, just first off here, because technically we use our money for ourselves our entire lives. Right. But just the way in which we utilize our money for ourselves shifts significantly over our life cycle. And just to set this up a little bit, I'll talk just some broad generalities about the different life phases that financial planners like me talk about and how we define them. And everybody's going to be different, so these are by no means a rule. It's just simply some general themes that we deal with, and they should have some application to everybody. So in our younger years, I mean, we're more focused on things like acquiring our education, launching careers, buying our first home, you know, raising kids, hopefully beginning to save and invest for future goals, if it's at all possible. And we kind of call this period the wealth protection phase. It might sound a little funny that we're worried about protecting our wealth at the very beginning when we have really yet to make it. But that's really because it's those early choices that we make that really have a very significant factor on how things look later on down the line. So things like, you know, getting yourself educated, choosing a profitable career, choosing a good spouse, and the way that we utilize that are key decisions that have really long lasting impacts over our whole cycle and how our picture looks. But, and then as time moves forward, we move into what we call the wealth accumulation phase. That's where, you know, our incomes have increased quite a bit over time with experience and hopefully making good professional decisions. We have more cash flow coming in that we can then divert toward investing toward future goals. And this period lasts right up until the end of our earning years, right? And then we hit 5:01 p.m. on the last day of our working lives. And I think that's what we're really driving at here in terms of this question and when the time is to flip the switch. And for most of us, it literally is 5:01 p.m., the last day of work. You know, we leave hopefully they have a party for us, you know, or something to send us out the door. And then we're into a whole new phase of life. And that's what we as financial planners call the retirement distribution phase. And this is where what's really happening is we're starting to live on the savings that we made through the previous two phases. And that phase will last until we leave this world. And, you know, our comfort during this phase, which is hopefully a very long one of our lives, is largely determined by those choices we made along the way. And hopefully they resulted in us accumulating sufficient resources to live the life you really want to live during these years. And it's just really, 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 really important to take stock, hopefully before the day we retire, of what your goals are, what you want it to look like, and set a plan in advance for how you're going to utilize those resources. And that's really what people like me do. Now, if you haven't, don't worry about it. Just, it's time to do it. But really, you know, speaking about it being different for everybody, retirement can mean a lot of different things to different people. I mean, for a lot of us, it's quite literally the day we stop working. But other folks, we either love what we do so much, or it's so central to our core identity of ourselves, we want to die with our boots on if at all possible, right? So that's different retirement looking different. Other folks say, hey, I've always wanted to do this, and now's my chance to do it. So they'll shift into a whole different second phase of career. And that's still part of your retirement picture. And that's great. And you're not necessarily going to be living off of those resources, but you should always have, like Steve was saying, contingency plans for what if something shifts with my health and I can't do this anymore. What if something happens with my spouse and I need to be taking care of her and I can't be doing what, you know, so really it's about making plans for various contingencies of life, and how it interacts with the resources you've accumulated over the course of your life. So yeah, that's what we do.
And an important thing I want to point out to people is I often hear, oh, well, you know, it's too late. I can't do retirement plan. It's too late for insurance, long-term care insurance. Folks, get the information. We are where we are. Let's do the best we can. And sometimes the picture's not nearly as dismal as we may believe it is for a variety of reasons. That's one of the reasons we have these webinars, seminars or webinars. That so often I have heard people, this topic or other time, I'm not going to go live with those old people at home. Well, let's get some information. And, you know, oh, it's just too much to make that move. I'm not going to do it. I'm staying here forever. Well, that may be the best decision for you, but you might benefit from being in a community of people. What I'm saying, all these topics are what have led us to offer these monthly seminars and webinars to help people have the information so they can make decisions. And I just keep saying that. And it's been fun for me over the years to see is people who attend these regularly, and to hear their conversations and to see how they've changed. And they talk about how it was made them think differently about this stage of their life. So let's go back to Steve now. And I think this is, again, it's going to depend. But one of the questions we often say is, okay, how, and I know you're focused on the insurance part, and that's a pretty broad part in this aspect of our life. But how do we plan ahead? How much is it going to cost us to live out the remaining 10, 20, 30 years of our life?
So that, again, it's an interesting question. And I don't know that I've really got an answer. I mean, I'm sure, you know, all of y'all are aware that Medicare has a cost. It's typically $144 a month and change. But, you know, when you talk about all the different ways you can adapt and change with situation. If I've got a widow or, you know, a single person who's making less than, say, $1,400 a month, there are programs that will help them control their costs. The state can pay for their Part D premium. There's programs that help in terms of prescription costs. There are private programs. For instance, if you know, many of y'all probably use the Scott and White provider group. They have a foundation that helps if there is some sort of situation that comes up that, you can't swing it for whatever reason, I've referred people over to them who've got breast cancer and couldn't afford to pay. And at the end of the day, the Scott and White Foundation stepped up and took care of them. So there's a whole host of different things. At the end of the day, I'm going to say, talk to somebody, whether it's me, whether it's your financial advisor, and just be aware that there are different people out there that do things different ways. I'm very, very invested in the concept of the broker, because there are people that work for a specific company and that's all they can sell. So, if you talk to somebody who only represents Humana, you're going to get shoehorned into something that Humana's got. If you talk to somebody who represents many companies, you're most likely going to end up with whatever suits your specific situation best. And so, that's the best answer I've got there, is that, under Medicare and a Medicare supplement, you really don't have to worry about medical costs. From a long-term care perspective, on a high level, I tend to not worry about a true blue long-term care policy for someone until somebody's got assets in excess of $700,000 to $800,000 that they're trying to protect. And from a life insurance standpoint, one of the things that's different about, call it Texas, the southern market, than what we see with some of the northern markets like New Jersey, which is where my grandparents are from. Many of us down here, from a legacy and estate standpoint, I would say 95% of the people that I talk to are like, if there's money left over, I'm fine if it goes to my kids. But I put them through school. We did a lot of things for them. And at the end of the day, I worked for this. They're making better money than I ever did. And again, if there's a nickel left over, okay. If there's a substantial inheritance left over, okay. But most people are okay with spending what they've got to make sure that their needs and everything are taken care of, because let's face it, you work your butt off over the course of 30, 40, 50 years, there comes a time that it's time to enjoy the harvest.
Mm-hmm. And that's what are our goals in life can be so important. And so again, it's all an individual matter there. So I want to move on then to this whole idea of a wealth advisor guiding people. You've touched on this, Will. Are there any more specifics to help us understand what your role is as a wealth advisor?
Gotcha. So really, we do a number of things as wealth advisors. And most people think typically about a wealth advisor being somebody who manages your investments, manages your money. But it's a whole lot more than that. And really, it has to do more with answering important questions than anything else. And there's a whole list of them. Things like, how do I want to spend my time, right? And how do I make that happen? Is my health good enough to do what I want to do? And are my goals realistic? Are my funds sufficient? And if the answer to any of those questions is no, what adjustments for reality do I need to make? And how do we make them? Investments are important. So how should I be invested as it appropriate, to what my goals are and my projected longevity and all those different things that come into play with it. Am I utilizing the assets that I have worked so hard for efficiently to get my highest utility out of them? Could I be generating more income? Do I have enough insurance, or do I have more than I need? Which is why we call people like Steve, and I work with folks like him, because those are just really important. And then if something happens to me, then what, right? Those are just really key questions that really want to do decisions throughout their lives. And a qualified advisor who's is a fiduciary and has a relationship with both parties can achieve far better outcomes than those where, let's just say, one spouse, the decision maker spouse passes away and the other has no idea what's going on. We really play a key role in those kind of situations as well, and helping the remaining spouse navigate. So having that relationship with an advisor and having both parties to a relationship have that just be right there in the middle of it really makes a big difference. So yeah.
And I think related to that too is, we haven't talked about this part, Will, so maybe putting you somewhat on the spot, but families, I see the situations where, so many of us come from this whole taboo, we don't talk about money. We grew
Right.
up that way. It's a very private topic. I didn't do well. I don't want someone to know where I am or where I'm not. And there's a great book, which anyway, I'll put the title on our handout afterwards. But it's helpful for me because I know I grew up in a family, you don't talk about money. And it's always been very hard for me. Even talk to my spouse about that, even talk to financial advisors. I mean, I feel like, oh, I didn't do right. We have to free ourselves of some of those ideas. But what I was really thinking about is family. I see the situation because we don't talk between parents and adult children about this. So I see adult children worried about, do mom or mom and dad have enough money, and they spend time worrying about it. But mom and dad may or may not, but wherever they are, and how do we plan for this? And so do you ever, I guess I'm sure it's up to the family, but do you see value in involving adult children or making them aware of the estate and so on?
Well, I guess the nuanced answer to that is it depends. We hear that a lot. I mean, it depends on the kids, right? I mean, because there might be some really constructive reasons for not having the kids know. And we can get into that when we talk about trusts too. Just know what they have access to potentially, or, if you have a kid who's, gee whiz, an open hand is never satisfied.
Is that what you're volunteering, Steve? You're going to take them.
Yeah.
We'll come to you. Just let me let Will finish, I'll come to Steve.
I have an answer to this.
Yeah.
I think that it's absolutely critical that the younger generation know who I am,
There you go.
know who the financial advisor is. However, just like with a doctor or any other professional that you work with, I want all of my clients to know who I am, or excuse me, I want all of my clients' kids to know who I am. But I am not talking about the specific details of any of their situations unless I have in writing from them permission to talk about it. But part of the reason I want that is because if something happens, and this is a little foreshadowing for one of the things that we're going to get to, that's one of the real meaty points of this, is there's trigger points in your life when you should be talking to me or a financial advisor or various other people. And it's so important that your kids know who you work with and who you trust. Mm-hmm. And I just can't stress that enough.
Yeah, I want to emphasize that too. And I agree completely with Steve. Knowing who the parties are and who the team is really important.
And any other detail, that's completely up to the situation. But knowing that we exist and who we are and that sort of thing, again, I mean, not to beat a dead horse here, but if I'm talking to somebody who's me, 45, got a dad with Alzheimer's, and we're trying to figure out what do we need to be doing. In 30 minutes, I can explain what needs to be done. We can review it every year, and as things change, which again comes back to these trigger points, when do you talk to these people? And we've been talking a lot of philosophy right now about general, again, philosophy. Why do we do things? When do we do things? That sort of thing. We're going to get some very specific points of when do you talk to someone? And so that's coming up here in a few minutes.
And, you know, I want to address real quickly, just, you know, where Virginia started about not, you know, wanting to talk about money aspects. And we're talking about even with our spouses, you know, or with an advisor like me, because we feel like there's things that we might have done that aren't the greatest, and we don't want to expose that, right? I think, I mean, a huge part of, you know, any situation in where you might be having some trouble in getting out of it is just having the humility and the courage to be vulnerable, you know, and have a relationship, make a relationship with someone you can trust to talk to about this stuff, and work on it. And we're each part of what counselors like Steve and I do. We've seen it all. You know, there's no need to be shy or anything. And we see it in our own families. I mean, you know, it's, you know, no family is immune to this stuff. So it's just being willing to be vulnerable and honest is just a huge benefit to anybody in a situation, especially where they're having a little bit of trouble. So
I think an important part here too, as we look at who would we want to work with in some of these areas, if you value personal relationships, you value that, not just the numbers, but who am I as a person? Who's going to help value me as a person, and not just, oh, well, you have this much money and you're, you know, so on. So I think that says a lot about if someone looks for someone to guide them. And I want to remind people in our 10 commitments to organize for smarter decisions, one of the things we had was, who are your advisors? Name, number, contact information. Make that available to people so people know who to carry on with, that you already have that relationship. And I appreciate both of you stressing the point of confidentiality. You know, what is appropriate to share, but at least have that relationship is what is so very important. And before we get to the trigger points that we're going to get to in just a minute, Steve just mentioned, which are so important. As I think back to my conversations and what I hear people saying, you know, I'm worried about if I'm going to have enough money. It's back to that fear of who can help me. It's kind of more just a specific question of what we were talking about. How much is it going to cost me to have you help me, Will? I mean, Steve already addressed a lot of yours comes from the services that are the companies that, and you can explain it better, Steve. I won't explain it right. But Will, so if I say, okay, I don't know, I just can't spend my money to go get someone like Will to advise me. Is that a fair question, Will? Can you give us a general answer?
it's an absolutely fair question, and a good one, and one that should be, you know, asked. I do want to caution against the impression of, oh, I can't afford an advisor, right? Because really the only service worth not paying for is a service that doesn't deliver on value, right? So that's where we should be looking at is, how much value am I getting for what my part of this is? And there's a lot of folks that unfortunately don't have trouble seeing the value of paying a qualified advisor to assist them in, you know, creating and managing their financial plan. And people often end up saving a nickel to spend a dime, unfortunately. You know, we're very focused on doing it myself because I don't want to pay somebody to do it. And I've seen disastrous outcomes from that, from very, very, very smart people, by the way. You know, that, and it's just because their area of expertise is different than mine, right? But they don't see the value in paying an advisor, someone like me, to take care of things. So I just want to say that it's mainly look at the value you're going to receive, and then decide, and then make your decision on for yourself. But really, I think a good advisor is really going to deliver tremendous value for what is a reasonable fee. I'll talk a little bit about compensation, how advisors are compensated, because that's kind of where the rubber meets the road here. So there's a couple different ways it happens. You have your commission broker type advisors who, you know, they charge a commission for the financial products that they sell you, or transactions they complete on your behalf, like, you know, buy, sell trades, stocks and bonds and such. And this is how they're compensated for the advice part of what they do. They're compensated by transactions and sales. Fee-based advisors, generally, they'll charge a flat fee based on the asset value of what they're managing for you. Fiduciaries, such as myself, we also work on that same basis. and were compensated generally by salary as opposed to a sales commission. And when it comes down to the financial planning side of things and investing, I think the advisor being compensated by salary sidesteps potential conflict of interest, which I believe is a benefit of working with a fiduciary. And that key issue is trust, though. Whoever you choose, the first criteria would be, have you built a relationship with this person that you feel you can sufficiently trust them with really what is your lifeline in life, okay? And really building that trust. And then transparency, especially in terms of fee compensation, is another key measure. So be sure to ask a lot of questions about how your advisor is compensated. A good advisor is going to be glad that you asked and going to be eager to provide that information. Now, the more a potential advisor has to explain, right? The more different, the more layers they have to start trying to explain, or if they're evasive about it, that should be a really big red flag about that trusting relationship. So transparency is just huge there. So I'll leave it with that.
The value is what is so important. Yes, people can do this. And I know many people do it yourself. Oh, I don't need anybody to help me with my investments or my selling my house or with my taxes or whatever. But that's where, if value is delivered, it can really save us a lot in the long run. So that we'll move off of that one. Oh, I did want to ask you one specific thing about the benefits from your perspective. We're not going to get into how to do the trust right now. We're maybe doing it backwards. We're going to pick up on that next month. But can you highlight the benefits of having a trust, who benefits from a trust, and so on?
Yes. So really, we'll talk, this kind of goes back almost to the first question that I talked about the phases of your financial life. This is where we're kind of talking about the wealth transfer phase, right? And most of us, that happens, the day that we pass on, then our assets get passed on. As we have higher levels of assets, that gets a little more complex, and we need to do more planning, much more planning in advance. But for folks that don't think they need an estate plan, well, I will say that not having an estate plan is an estate plan, right? That the plan is saying you want the state to decide who gets your assets, on what terms, and I can't see a world in where that's attractive to anyone. So at least we will need to have a will, right? That's where almost all of us will need a will. There's also your transfer on death orders on your bank accounts, your beneficiary designations. Those things are important. And first, I'm going to keep beating a dead horse too. For couples, a key component should be make sure your spouse knows all the pertinent information should something happen to you. Where are the important documents? Have access to all the financial information, the passwords to accounts, everything, who the advisors are. I can't say it enough, especially to do-it-yourselfers. It's just so important. A spouse who's kept in the dark is going to have a hard time navigating. And outdated estate plan is almost as bad as no will you did in your 20s when you had 2 pennies to rub together. Yeah. And then we get to trust. Okay. Trusts are a really particularly flexible estate planning tool. They're very flexible. And there's a couple of really big misconceptions about it. One is they are a tool for only the wealthy, and the second is that they're expensive to manage, and both of those are misnomers. Essentially, a trust can benefit anyone who has assets to pass on that doesn't just want to pass them on outright to their heirs. There's a variety of reasons for that. We kind of talked a little bit earlier about, the kid or the nephew or whoever's going to get your assets. It's what we call a spendthrift. They burn that money sometimes faster than they get it. Having a trust can help provide control to how that gets disseminated to them and on what terms. And it also can help provide them with creditor protection. If that's an issue for them, they've got creditors, after them. Spendthrift trusts can really provide them a lot of protection from themselves and from their creditors. You can also do things like, if you have specific goals that you want your heirs to use your assets for, such as education or starting a business or something like that, you can build that into your trust and really have control over what is going to happen and how the money is going to be used, so that you can have a lot more of an idea of what's going to happen. And then as for the perception that they're expensive to manage, there are firms that can manage your trust as a corporate professional trustee that are no more costly to work with than a fee-based financial planner. Like the costs are virtually identical. So it's not expensive. So we just want to misspell those. And thanks for bearing with me in, my in that extended answer. This is stuff that's really important to me on that topic. So, but I will say, lastly, working with an accredited estate planning attorney on these things is crucial. Generalists are generalists, right? But you don't go to your general practitioner office for brain surgery, right? It's the same thing with attorneys. They specialize. So work with an estate planning attorney. Thank you.
And that's important information to have. And I think that along those lines, you brought up another one of the points that you'd both, will let Steve address this one first. Things change. And I know that after last month's webinar, people said, well, I have all this information. Thank you all for supporting our document that we encourage people to put together about what do I have, where is it, who managed it, and so on and so on. If you didn't do it last time, you can keep working on it. But I heard several people, we put this together several years ago, but we haven't revisited it. Health situations may have changed, families have changed. So we always need to keep things up to date. And Steve, I want you to start us off on this conversation about trigger points. You both talked about what are those trigger points that people need to be aware of, as it may cause a change that we need to revisit or reconnect with our advisors. You want to start us off, Steve?
Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, I don't think you even realized that you did it, but you nailed it on the head about 2 minutes ago. You said things change. And pretty much every one of the trigger points when you should be talking to someone involves change. Whether it's, okay, we're looking at, it's a year to 2 years before retiring, or okay, we're now 6 months out. We need to get, it's almost like packing for a trip. Okay, we know we want to go on the trip. I happen to be going down to South Padre Island tomorrow. So I'm in the, I got to pack tonight. But we've also been arranging for people to take care of the pets, in the past couple of weeks and doing all that sort of thing. So it's your classic planning. But in addition, when you want to talk to someone like me or Will, if there is some significant change, somebody ends up in a hospital, not just, going in for a little day surgery or whatever, but somebody's in for 3 days, 5 days, 10 days, something like that. It's worth calling and just saying, hey, just wanted to let you know, my wife was in the hospital. Here's what we're thinking. And A, you're going to get a card from me that says, hey, I hope that, you're feeling better. B, I'm going to say, okay, well, implications from a healthcare standpoint, here's what this means. Here's what you should expect in terms of bills. And it's just, there's a little bit of hand holding there. There's a little bit of, this is not the end of the world. And so that, that's one reason. When somebody's abilities change, whether it's a cognitive, whether it's a physical, one of the recent changes that we had was we had to take my dad's keys away. He was diagnosed for 2-3 years before. Basically, he went and took a driving test every year, and he finally failed his driving test, which really stinks because taking away somebody's keys is really hard. But we'd been planning for that all along because it was like, hey, Dad, I want you to keep driving as long as you can. But as soon as this test says you aren't safe anymore, we need to talk about taking the keys away because I've got 2 little girls. And if you or someone else who's not safe to drive anymore ever hurt my kids, God help you. You know, and that's maybe a mean way to say it, but when somebody's thinking about me and I'm suffering and I don't want that to happen to me, part of how I distract them from thinking about just me is how does this affect everybody else? And so, you know, there's that. You know, anytime you get some sort of financial change, if I get somebody that gets a rate increase on their long-term care insurance, you're going to get this big long letter. What do we do? Talk to me. You know, we can look at, do you do A? Do you do B? Do you do something different? Are there options that they're not providing that are out there that are worth looking at? And, you know, we've had a number of conversations with y'all, various people that do this seminar. People said, oh yeah, we've got long-term care insurance. Call Howard, call me, and we'll talk about it. And so, you know, the last one that's kind of on my notes here, if you've had everything set up and it's been working just peachy keen, smooth, whatever else, but it's been at least 3 years since you've talked to somebody, go talk to somebody. Just have a quick once over on it. It might take 15 minutes, it might take 30 minutes, but those are kind of my standard trigger points that I'm talking to people about is, when is it changing? Or has it just been long enough that maybe you ought to go talk to somebody? I mean, ideally, I'm talking to people every 6 to 12 months, but you know, I get it. If you've got it and it's working well, yeah, roll with it.
I want to pick up on one of your points in there, because I know that we have a lot of people who are dealing with this. Couples who are dealing with one person facing, you know, declining mental, or knowing that this is coming. And, you know, they're planning ahead for that. A critical time to, let's look at this. This is what we're facing. Or an individual who learns of a change in their, you know, my health may be changing more drastically in a short time. How do I get that information? And again, it's going to the professionals, going to advisors to help you revamp your package or put a package together. Will, what are some things you would like to add to our trigger points?
You're muted. Your mic's muted, Will.
There
How
you
about
go.
that? Oh, okay. There we are. So, you know, the trigger points that were discussed are, of course, are just key, and they're really important. And I think they overlap a lot with, I mean, with what I do, which is, you know, why I really like to be you know, with any team, I want to make sure that we've got the estate planning attorney we work with, your CPAs, your insurance guy. I work with everybody because of all these different things. There's pieces that I don't do because I don't try to do it all, right? But I need to know when these things happen, when it comes to health, any major financial change at all, so that I know, okay, cool, we should loop Steve into the conversation. We should loop your attorney, your CPA, or all of us should have a conversation together. So those are all really important. I mean, other ones are like, though, let's just say, hey, you know what? I always wanted a really big fishing boat, and I really want to go buy one. So I'm going to go do that, right? That may or may not be the ideal decision to make. So it's something we should talk about when you're going to make a major financial decision like that. How does that fit into the overall plan you've got? And what we've been working on this whole time? How does it impact, you know, or, you know, I want to buy a second home, or I want to sell one of my pieces of property. How does that impact it? So anytime we got a major change, I think that's the one thing I would add is just a significant event, be it an inheritance or other liquidity event where new liquidities come in, or we're taking liquidity out of the picture, or my health has changed or something. We should just have a talk and see what we can do to, you know, make adjustments and make sure that you're, you know, getting the highest and best use of what you've worked for.
And speaking of liquidity, a lot of the people who attend our webinars are homeowners who are looking at some point in selling their home. And how do we plan ahead for what do I do with the monies from the sale of my home? How do I use that money? And to plan ahead rather than, oh, I've got to do something right now. And as a realtor, that's one of the things that we can help people do. We may not be selling our home for a year or more, but we can at least look at, it's not exactly what the home is going to be selling for because we don't know what the market will be. But do we have an idea? And it also is then impacted by the condition of the home. Well, I want more money for my home. Well, there's some things that might be advantageous to do to the home. Or it might be better not to put money into it and just to sell it at a little bit lower price. So I think that comes into the kind of planning for some people too, that is an important consideration back to the professionals involved in the discussion. Okay, before we open it to
And that's a big part of putting a plan together. We really look at.
what was that? I'm sorry, you broke up there.
Oh, I'm sorry, Virginia. It sounded like you had stopped. I think that everything just froze on my end, and I thought you weren't talking. My apologies.
No, you're fine. Anything else you want to add before we open it up to the?
Yeah. Well, I was just going to say, it's one reason I'm very glad to know you. You know, when we're putting a financial plan, where we're looking, you know, doing the forward-looking projections, that's one of the key questions we ask is, you know, do you plan to stay in the home that you have, or are you looking at downsizing at some point and then freeing up capital? Because then that impacts, you know, how we're going to do stuff. So those are just really good things to think about in the future. You know, and just having those lines of thought is key.
Great. Networking is important. Steve, you wanted to add something.
Yeah. So, you know, we were talking about change. Interestingly enough, I just wanted to share a quick story about one of the effects that's probably not very intuitive that we're seeing with this whole COVID pandemic thing right now. Most of my clients are people that are eligible for Medicare or for Social Security. But one of the things that I've been doing is I've been talking to my clients and saying, hey, I know you've got kids. If we talk about life insurance through work, what happens if your kids get laid off or if they get sick and that coverage goes away? What's an appropriate response? And so I have actually been helping people's kids look at their situation and make some decisions about what do we do, you know, now. Because I mean, you know, like in my situation, my wife works for the IRS. Don't hold it against me. But with everything that's happening at school, I've got two daughters. They're 13 and they're 9. And Pflugerville has made the decision that the first 3 weeks of school are going to be virtual. After that, we'll see. But she's really fortunate that she may be able to use some sort of FMLA or something else leave, and be able to stay home on, like, say, 2/3 pay. And so my family is extraordinarily fortunate with just how things have played out for us. There are a lot of other families that are going to have to make some really hard decisions. And there are some of these secondary and third tier implications that people just don't think about. I mean, seriously. Does my wife, does my husband stay home with kids? What are the implications of that? Well, I mean, the big implication is, oh, paycheck. But are people thinking about their health insurance or their life insurance or all of the other potential implications of that? They're not. And so if any of you have kids that are potentially in this boat, especially since school is potentially starting up here in August, I'm just going to say, you'll have my contact information. You're welcome to send this to any of the kids. And as a parent, as somebody that's dealing with this myself, I'm more than happy to give them 15, 30 minutes, an hour, whatever, for a phone call to talk about some of the things that you might not be thinking about as a parent. So just throwing that out there. And they don't even have to be in Texas, because this is much more, you know, from an insurance standpoint, yes, licensing Texas, Kansas, Louisiana, those are the states I'm licensed in. But from a just standard standpoint, I don't care. Have them call me, because you know, there are definitely things that we aren't thinking about unless you're in this business or in some specific thing, you know, some specific niche industry. So there's that.
A good point, Steve. I think many of us are in the situation where we're, you know, we're just kind of waiting to see what happens with our children and their employment and how they manage keeping children at home or manage work and anyway, so there are a lot of unknowns.
Yeah.
Truthfully, I hadn't thought about, and you know, if something should happen, you know, I was thinking more just about the job itself and the salary. I didn't think about all those other things behind it in terms of benefits. And so anyway, okay, well, on that cheerful note, let's open this up. And so I hope that we will have questions from our attendees. You can, on your screen, raise your hand. If you'll mark, raise your hand, and we will unmute you. That takes a joint effort. I unmute you, and you unmute yourself too. Questions that people might have for us, hopefully.
You know, I mean, Ann's had her hand up forever. Ann Froelich.
Oh, okay. Oh, I see. I got to go up here. Thank you. Oh, and I see Jim Norton. Well, Ann put her hand down. Well, in the meantime, I'll come back to Ann. Jim Norton. Jim, can you unmute yourself, Jim? Okay. Jim Norton. Okay, let me try again here. Let's see here. The wonders of technology. Jeff, can you help me get Jim unmuted, or is it that Jim needs to unmute himself?
While they're working on the technical issues, oh, there we go.
Okay, okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. My wife and I have had a long-term care insurance policy, paid up policy for 23 years. My concern is with all these businesses struggling with revenue, what will happen to that insurance company or what will happen to us if the insurance company goes under?
I have an exact answer for that.
Great.
And because I like my stories, I'm going to use a story as an example. I had a fellow from Illinois who lived down here in Texas. He'd moved down, you know, probably 5-6 years ago. And he had this absolutely amazing long-term care policy. I won't go into details, but the company was bankrupt. And what happens in that is there is something called a state guarantee association. And as a general rule, all of these different carriers are members of a state guarantee association. And so there's a specific amount of money that state guarantee association will guarantee. So in your situation, since the policy is paid up, you don't have to worry about continuing to make payments. But in a situation where, let's just say Bob's insurance company goes broke and the state guarantee steps up, the state guarantee association steps up. If you did need to continue making payments, make sure you keep making your payments, even though the company's quote broke, because the state guarantee association will take those premiums and they will honor all the details of the policy up to a specific amount. So when I talk about this guy's policy, his policy was good for both him and his wife up to about $350,000 worth of long-term care. And the state guarantee association would only guarantee $300,000 of benefits. But what I told him is, I said, keep on making the payments on this because you're paying such a little bitty tiny amount for such an awesome policy, even though at the end of the day, on the back end, you might not get that last $50,000 that the policy is supposed to pay. You've got $300 on the front end that's guaranteed. And so at the end of the day, if I'm telling you, should you be worried? The answer is no.
Good, thank you.
if that goes belly up, we have bigger problems on our plate, like better have a gun and people are looting houses and stuff like that. So
Okay, another cheerful note. Thank you very much. So Jim, did that answer help you with your question?
Yes, it does. I'll sleep better tonight. Thank you, Steve. Appreciate it.
Okay, and I know Jim likes stories, so the story part was good, Steve. Other questions that people have? You said, I don't see Ann. Maybe Ann got her question answered. Her hand's no longer up. If you have a question, Ann, Carla, go ahead and raise it, put your hand back up. Don't see it right. Oh, Carlos has a question. Let's see from Carlos. Okay. Carlos, can you unmute yourself?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Can you hear me? Yes.
Yes.
I have a question for William. Can he elaborate a little bit on the executor services that he mentioned briefly?
Great question. So yeah, executors are, that's the person who handles the distribution of your will and essentially is the person who, files the letters testamentary with the court and works with the probate court to make sure that the terms of your will are executed by the letter. And that's specifically something that we do.
I want to add something to that. I hope this is all right, Carlos, because I remember I had some discussions with your wife and she was talking with others. Our topic last month came up with, when we were talking about who's going to, have someone who's going to take care of this, are your children going to be your executor and so on. So for people who do not have children, there was a discussion, who do they turn to? And so is that yes, or the attorney? What I think that is this part of what you're referring to also, Carlos?
Yes, this was my question for individuals who have no children or trusted relatives.
Okay, good.
And that's, yeah, and that's really important. I would actually say for all from that party side, especially where one kid.
No, well, I'm gonna let you start over in the answer. For some reason, the internet reception was bad.
Oh.
It seems to be better now. Let's see if you could, for people who have no children or trusted relatives that they want to administer.
Yeah. There's a lot of reasons that it's actually preferable to have a disinterested third party be your executor. When one child, especially when you have multiple children, let's say, even if you have children, right? You have one child who's the executor, they're under a tremendous amount of pressure, right? To do something, and siblings, there are significant issues that can crop up, and I've seen it happen time and again. And you got to remember too, they just lost their parents. They're grieving, right? And they're having to go through this process and do this all at the same time. So I think sometimes it shortchanges them on that grieving process to have to dive into this whole other legal process too. And even if everybody gets along great, that is an issue for a lot of people. So a disinterested third party, and I think a regulated fiduciary is a very good way to go, because simply the fact is, a fiduciary is regulated and audited and you have a lot of assurance that things are going to go right. Versus there's a lot of X factors when somebody else does it. So
is that something that VeraBank offers, or?
Yes, it is. It is something that we do as part of our fiduciary services.
yeah, can I throw in a little history? Is
Yes.
anybody interested in history?
Yeah.
So, in learning about this industry and everything else, this question had come up, and a lot of you probably remember the days when there were what were called trust and savings banks around, just like on every other corner. And what we saw probably, would you say about 20 years ago, Will, was basically a lot of these trust and savings banks converted from being a trust and savings over to just a straight up bank. And part of the reason for that is being a trust and savings bank, for lack of a better word, is a pain in the tuchus. You've got a lot of issues, and I wasn't aware that people like Will even existed anymore. Because when you want somebody to act as an executor or a trustee, you know, I thought all the trust and savings banks were basically gone. So to have somebody that is available to be an executor like this, and can do this, I was actually really excited, because for people that either have a kid that's disabled, it's important, because, you know, a lot of people, if their first kid has some sort of issue, they never have another one. And what happens for that kid down the road? So for people who have a special needs child, this is huge. This is important. You know, for people that never have kids, it's important to, you know, make sure that whatever they want to have happen after they're both gone, you know, that matters too. So history lesson over, but it is awesome that these type people actually still exist.
Thank you.
Okay, great. I hope that helped, Carlos. Thank you. Thanks for joining us again today. Let's go to Catherine Rice.
Can you hear me?
Yes, you should have this
Okay.
mastered, Catherine. You're always a good question.
I don't know. I don't even know if this is an answerable question. It's probably for William. Is there an average percentage per year that you should spend or keep to a spending average so that you don't deplete your assets? And does it vary year to year based on how the economy is going?
That is a fantastic question, and it is indeed answerable.
Good.
You know, there's rules of thumb out there.
Il a une très mauvaise micro.
I'll mute you.
There's rules of thumb out there. I think Carlos is unmuted.
I think I just.
Okay.
Okay. Go ahead, Catherine, or Will. No, we have Will froze.
So yeah, generally speaking, there, you know, we have what we call drawdown rates on, let's just say, a retirement account, for example, your IRA, your retirement savings. For a lot of people, that rule of thumb tends to be right around 4% per year. There's some reasons for that. One thing, you know, when you have a balanced investment portfolio, your average return is going to be, over time anyway, history says about 5% on average. And then once you account for fees, what you're doing is you're able to then, you're withdrawing your income and a certain amount of, you know, growth in the account, and, you know, whatever fees you're paying your advisor without depleting your account. So that's kind of just a general rule of thumb. It's going to be different for everybody, and we need to look at it specifically, but we kind of look at it as a percentage of assets basis, and then we project it out to make sure that, you know, given how long we expect to live, is that percentage reasonable? And it's different for some people, and but I'd say 4% is just a general, very broad rule of thumb.
Okay, does that help you, Catherine?
Yes, thank you. I haven't spent much since I've been quarantined with COVID, but but maybe I'll go shopping.
Amazon loves you.
Okay, thanks, Catherine. All right, other questions that people have? Oh, Marvin. Okay, let's see. Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, there you go.
Okay. I have another question about averages or reasonableness, and that is fees for advisories, for financial advisors. I'm looking for one, and I'm getting all kinds of fees, and I have no idea what is a reasonable fee based on your portfolio, and also for services like combining advisory fee with our advisory feedback with tax advisors, with insurance, so that you look at the whole picture. What would be a reasonable fee that I could expect?
I can speak to
Well-
just specifically on the advisor, the advisor part. And I'm only going to speak to the flat fee advisor and fiduciary schedule, because that's where I've chosen to live for my career. And I think it's generally less costly than in a lot of ways than the commission model. Not exclusively, but I'd say generally. So your advisor is going to work on a fee schedule. And I would say the very middle of the road, and it's a fee schedule that will basically depend on the amount of assets, and they're usually tiered. And I'd say around the middle of the road for the industry is a fee schedule that starts at 1% per year on, let's just say, for example, the first $1 million of assets under management, and then declines for additional amounts. So let's say you get to the first, you have $1 million on the 1% on the first million, and then 75% of 1% on the second million, and so on, and it keeps going down, so that you're stepping down a fee schedule as the amount of assets rises. But I'd say on that first million, 1% per year is kind of middle of the road for a reasonable advisor fee. Above that, they should be talking
Lost you, Will.
about why they deliver additional.
Will, we're having a problem with your connection right now. I'm going to go to Stephen and come back to see. Okay, 'cause you wanted to add something to Marvin's question.
Yep. So much like when I was talking about broker versus captive with the insurance world, in the financial advisory world, you also have two different ways people can be set up. And there is a site called brokercheck.finra.org. And I can put that up on the screen if anybody needs, where basically you can go look up anybody that's securities licensed. But the point I'm getting to is there's securities licenses where you get compensated by, selling or buying stuff. It's, basically a commission-based model. So if you've ever seen an ad where people are talking about high commissions or things like that, those people are talking about being licensed under that type setup. The other type of setup is what's called an IAR, which is an investment advisory representative. And that is typically a Series 65 or 66 type license. And those people can be compensated either for total assets under management or on a fixed fee basis. You can just pay somebody to develop a plan for you. But the key important point, and Will's made this point, is that if you're an investment advisor representative, IAR, you're 65, 66, whatever, you are a fiduciary. If you are acting as just a stockbroker, you're not. And so if you've got a guy that you work with on your stocks or whatever else, and this is very much more the old school model, he says, hey man, he calls you up and says, there's, Apple's taking it in the teeth, right? Or actually, let's go back to something everybody remembers. Hey, this Deepwater Horizon thing, BP is taking it in the teeth. It's brutal. Their price is down 40%, but it's BP. We're recommending that our clients buy some BP right now. Would have been a great investment because at the end of the day, it worked out quite well. But those guys that are making that type of recommendation, it's a sale. It's not acting in somebody's financial best interest. And so that's one of the points that Will's making is if you're shopping these type people, a 1% fees, fairly normal. You could sometimes get a little lower, sometimes a little higher, it just kind of depends. But ask them if they're a fiduciary and ask them if they're acting as an IAR, an investment advisor representative. Is that reasonably?
Well, is that?
Could y'all hear me?
Yeah, it's a little choppy.
Could y'all hear me? Okay, so I do want to clarify when you have, I'm basically a because I'm a trust officer, fiduciary, I serve, we are not, as a bank-based fiduciary advisor and trust officer, we are not actually regulated by the SEC. So I don't sell stocks, bonds, mutual funds, or any financial products directly to the client. We do everything on a relationship-based deal where we invest monies on behalf of our clients. So we actually don't fall under SEC. They're regulated by the OCC as a bank. So if you were to go to Broker Check and look for someone like me, we're not going to be there because we don't actually utilize securities licenses because we don't sell securities or anything. Everything is under a relationship umbrella. So I just wanted to clarify that piece of it. Now where you have, let's just say, fee-based financial advisor who's an independent fee-based financial advisor, they will generally be under the SEC separately, versus someone who works for a bank like me, we're under OCC. So it's just a different regulatory body. So I just wanted to make that distinction really quick. Slight difference.
And I didn't know that. So, yay for learning something new. That's awesome.
That's good. Nice
2 thumbs up on that.
Right, and it's not a contradiction, it's a clarification of the role. So that helps us. Did that help you, Marvin?
That helps. Now, fiduciary, I've heard that term, and it sounds like that's something I really want. Is there anything besides them just telling me they're a fiduciary? Is there something that they can document and show me that they are a fiduciary?
Generally speaking, when you at a bank, we can show you, our regulatory structure and talk about how that is. It's really the regulatory body. If we're regulated by the OCC, which is Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, as a bank, we have to be a fiduciary. It's like that is how that is. We could have our bank manager come out with regulatory filings to prove it. And if you're working with some bank who is not, that's a signatory that you're the fiduciary, regulated by the OCC or the FDIC, just depending on if the state charter or a nationally chartered bank.
And from my perspective on that, bear in mind that I'm not an attorney and this is not any kind of legal advice, but my understanding is that if you have something in writing, even as simple as an email that says, yes, I am a fiduciary, that person will be held to a fiduciary standard. And with the state of the courts and everything else today, if they don't do right by you and it goes to court, they will lose. And when you talk about what they will lose means, in general, financial advisors should have something called heirs and omission insurance, because let's say they lose to the tune of $100,000 in a court or $200,000. There are many financial advisors that are not going to be able to pay that, deal with that, et cetera, but they should have E&O insurance to the tune of $1 million, $2 million, whatever else, that would potentially enable you to recoup losses. And, we never, ever want to see that happen. But, sometimes stuff happens.
Being prepared and knowing, we don't want you with the fly-by-nighters. We want the experienced professionals who are looking out for the interest. So I hope that helped, Marvin. I want to see, Jim, I don't know if I failed to lower your hand a while ago, or did you have another question? You're welcome to have another question. Do you have another question, Jim?
I think, and I know we're coming to the end, and let me turn on my mic. You can hear me now? Because
we hear you.
Okay, good. One of the things that I'm looking at right now is I've got a house, great house, my wife and I really, really like, about 13 years old. And we have, over the past 4 or 5 years, put in a dishwasher, washing machine, and a water heater. Now, it's 13 years old, and the next thing I'm looking at is maybe an air conditioner, and I have a car that's 20 years old. So I've got 2 major expenses that might come up tomorrow. So I'm thinking about it. I've had some bids. I've been looking at the car, how much it's worth. So it's not, if it does happen tomorrow, I think I'll be ready for it. But I think people should look at those expenses also, other than the other expenses that come up.
And don't forget roof.
Roof, and I have a roof coming up in 2 weeks, but thank goodness for the insurance company.
And
I'm in the same boat.
Right.
be sure you work with a roofing company that will be around after the influx of activity this time. And all of those are good questions, setting your priority with my realtor hat on.
If I may, really quick.
What's that? You know, knowing what's the best. Yeah.
I
Jim?
was just going to say.
Oh, Will. Okay, I'm sorry, Will.
We're breaking up. I'm not sure where we're at. I was just going to say that's those types of expenses are such an important contingency to have planned for, and that's why you never want to be invested 100%, right? You want to make sure that you have built into your plan sufficient cash to deal with contingencies like this, so you don't have to go and sell investments that are growing and doing different things for you to handle sudden unexpected things or expected things. You know, having that cash set aside is crucial. It sounds like Jim's doing that, so that's awesome.
And that's when you hope the storms come by at the right time to help you out on the roof too. So
Right.
Anyway, okay. Steve.
Hey, Virginia,
My house is 1 year old and I lost it.
there's one other point that I should bring up along these lines. Many of us, you probably will, definitely me, have been in this game long enough that we know lots of people in various positions. And so I'm going to say that if you need a roof, if you need an air conditioner, or you have some big something or other, feel free to reach out to somebody, you know, in an allied profession and say, hey, what do you think about so-and-so, or do you have a recommendation? Because, you know, especially with Virginia being a realtor, I guarantee you she knows the people who do good work and have been around. And, you know, if you're going to spend $8,000 on an air conditioner, which I did about a year ago, or if you're going to spend whatever it costs for the roof, which I did about 3 years ago, don't feel any hesitation about a quick email or a call to say, hey, we're looking at these guys. Are they okay? Or do you have anybody else you'd recommend? Because all of us like to have connections to people in the industry that do stuff like this. So, you know, we're a resource for that too. Don't hesitate to call us or email us on, hey, do you know someone who does blah, blah.
And that's important. I appreciate your calling that to our attention. Jim, you do know a realtor who can help you out with that. It was the realtor who helped you sell and buy your house. We worked together, had a great time. That was interesting, putting puzzle pieces together in a very timely manner.
2 days, buy and sell. It was great.
We're going to need to cut this off. I want to thank our panelists for being with us today. And you know, these topics are always broad, and yes, the answer often is it depends. But what I hope is that our conversation provides a catalyst for people to think, and what do I need to do? What are my next steps? You know, could Will or Steve help you, or could they direct you towards someone, or what could my role be to help you? That's what we're wanting to do, is to help you have the information to make decisions. So thank you very much, Steve and Will, for your willingness to give the time to be here, and your willingness to be a resource for people who might contact you. And we would love to do that. I was going to also emphasize that Steve with Silver Key Benefits has been a sponsor of the seminars, which we greatly appreciate. We're going to see if we might get Will with us on that too in the future. I hope to see you all next month. Our August webinar following up on this will be Probate, Wills, and Trust, what you need to know. So that will be great. And if any follow-up, feel free to call and ask for information. We're here to do that. And on that, we're going to say today, close for today. Most importantly, stay healthy and well during this time. And Look forward to seeing you in the next webinar and sometime to seeing you in lives at a live seminar. So thanks for being here and take care. Bye-bye.
Y'all take care.